In 2017, darkness fell upon the western Myanmar state of Rakhine. The people who live here, the Rohingya, are a Muslim Southeast Asian group that do not have a state of their own, yet have had a very long history of living in the Rakhine area. They are persecuted for their faith and treated differently as outsiders by Myanmar. In 2017, they were persecuted, attacked, tortured, and many of them had their lives cut short. These attacks targeted elders, children, heads of families, and more. After this, 800,000 people started to flee the area and ended up living in Bangladesh. The military here, known as the Tatmadaw, have continued to defend their actions, saying that they are the defenders of Buddhism and that they are true nationalists for Myanmar. Yet internationally, this military is viewed as committing human rights violations left and right. This history of the Rohingya people being attacked and treated wrong goes back a lot longer than 2017. Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Prize-winning head of state in Myanmar, has continued to back this military, and it has undermined her reputation as a peace-loving leader very heavily. On top of this, the military and government of Myanmar are accused of caring only about Burmese people, the nationalists of Myanmar, despite the fact that this nation recognizes over 100 different ethnic groups living within their borders. But beyond that is something much, much worse. What is laid at the feet of Myanmar's government is not something light. It is the accusation that they have committed a genocide against the Rohingya people. Hello everyone, my name is Reese Garlinsky, and today we are talking about the horrors of what has happened to the Rohingya people living in Rakhine, a state in western Myanmar. This history goes back a long time, and as I've given you in the intro, there is a lot that connects to why this is happening. I will cover the history of not only the last 2 decades, the attack in 2017, but I will try my best to cover all that led up to this moment and why we are in the state we are in, where Myanmar is accused of genociding the people of this state. What is happening here is truly terrible, and we need to be aware of it, no matter if it's our money going towards it or not, like it is with certain nations. No matter where you are in the world, you should know about what is happening when things as evil as this are happening. So please, tune in, sit back, and let's talk about some history, because this is what's happening in Myanmar today. Our origins begin with the Rohingya, which is a term that refers to the Muslim people living in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, which is in the westernmost state in the nation. This state was known as Arakan throughout most of its history, which was independent or managed by foreign powers throughout its history instead of being managed by Myanmar. In 1780, the Third Empire of Burma invaded Arakan to take laborers as slaves and executed those they considered useless. Over 100,000 people fled the area for Bengal, the modern Indian state of West Bengal. Thousands started a new life in Bengal and in the areas that eventually became Bangladesh. Britain took over Arakan, then made an offer for people living in Bengal to move back to Arakan. However, many of the Burmese didn't like these Arakan descendants moving back because they felt like they were having their land bargained with by a European power and invaded by non-resident foreigners. The British saw it as one British colony with people moving across it. They viewed it as one giant colony with India and didn't see it as different people. And the issues with the British, Burmese, Arakan, and someone else happened in World War II. When the Japanese started to invade this part of Southeastern Asia, there was a split in the loyalty. The Burmese, who now had a bad taste in their mouth about the British, not only because of general colonization, but because of the fact that they supported the Arakan, wanted to side with the Japanese. The Burmese took the side of the Japanese and did not fight back against them when they invaded. However, the Arakan were different. They supported the British because they were already used to them being in control, and the British offered them some level of sovereignty and sanctity. The Japanese did not. So there was a split within the area that became Myanmar between those of Arakan descent that wanted to support the Brits and stay loyal to them, and those that thought the Japanese would kind of act as a liberator from British colonization. And then independence came after the Second World War in 1948. However, that was only for Burma. They did not include Arakan. The people living here wanted to join Bangladesh as it formed, but Burma did not approve this and wanted the land to fall back into its control. The Muslim population here, which I will now refer to as the Rohingya, was limited in their fight in the 1960s. Many of them had fled the area for India so they could be safe during the Second World War. But those that fled were not let back into their homes and were seen as foreigners by the Burma government. In 1962, a socialist military government took power in Burma and ousted any Rohingya who held political or military positions. The next step was removing cultural hubs within the nation that represented foreigners, in this case, the Rohingya. Political figures were arrested, and political parties were completely removed if they had any Rohingya influence. In 1978, there was Operation Dragon King, which attempted to remove anyone from the nation that wasn't Burmese. Awful human rights abuses were used to force people out of the areas they lived. Thousands more fled for Bangladesh. Rohingya was not named as a national race of Burma in the 1982 citizenship law, despite the fact that it did list 100 different ethnicities living in Burma with legal status. Without an easy trace to Burmese lineage, Rohingya people were named aliens to the nation, even though they had been living in the Rakhine state since the 1500s. And Rakhine is the new name under Burma for Arakan. Arakan becomes the Rakhine state, and the people living in Arakan become known as the Rohingya. And they like to be referred to as the Rohingya people of Rakhine because of their connection to the land. Then, in 1989, the nation was renamed Myanmar. The military took harsh control of the nation and tried to continue the purge against minority groups. In 1991, Operation, quote, Clean and Beautiful Nation, end quote, saw the military take an even more aggressive approach against the Rohingya people, which led to the mass migration of over 250,000 Rohingya to Bangladesh. The Rohingya Solidarity Organization was founded, and it worked to create a space for Rohingya through many different means, and stated that they would do it by any means necessary. And since the 1990s, some of the worst offenders of mistreating different ethnic groups in Myanmar was actually Buddhist monks. This issue started with them in the 90s, and then they continued to be loud from that point forward. These monks have marched against Muslims, destroyed dozens of mosques in the state, and have continued to put out propaganda suggesting the Muslims would remove the Burmese culture and that they were the enemies of Buddhism. Many believe this hate from the Buddhists comes from the way that Buddhists were erased in Afghanistan by the Taliban in the city of Twangwu. An anti-foreigner riot broke out, which saw a mosque attacked alongside the death of 200 Muslims in the Rakhine state. All of these predated the formation of a Buddhist nationalist movement called 969, which formed in 2012. This movement is led by Sayadaw Warathu, who is known by the moniker Buddhist Ben Laden. And then a very odd but very important note to make is what comes next, which is this weird system that somehow led directly to some of the worst actions from the Myanmar government towards the Rohingya people. So Myanmar secured a deal with cell phone companies that pre-installed Facebook on all of its phones. This happened right around 2012-2015 range when they really started to get involved in the internet. All these phones gave citizens unlimited use of data on the phone if they were using Facebook. So Facebook secured this deal so that all the phones would come with it, and it would benefit sales of both the phone and Facebook usage. But since Facebook was now able to be free use, it kind of acted as the main social platform for the entirety of Myanmar. Buddhist monks, some of them, not all of them, used this to spread anti-Rohingya propaganda, encouraged isolating or hurting them nationwide. And that is why today so many people say Facebook was somewhat the cause for what happens in 2017, which we'll get into soon. The Rohingya people were actively denied education, access to equal health care, insurance, and other needs. There has been laws that limit how and who they can marry, limits on their reproductive rights, and a law that forced them to carry ID cards that labels them differently, much like people were labeled during the Holocaust. In 2015, Myanmar held its first free election since the start of the military junta, and there was hope that the fire of the nationalist hate would be quelled. However, this was not the case. In 2016, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, was formed as a new insurrectionist movement. It attacked a police station on the border of the Rakhine state, which killed at least 10 police officers. And the retaliation was the largest attack on the Rohingya yet. In 2017, thousands of homes were destroyed, and as people fled, real horrors followed. People were gunned down by helicopters, massive sexual assault blights followed, and child abuse came next. Extreme violence and homicide against children continued. At least 400 civilians were killed in the first wave of the attacks, and they continued from August to the end of 2017. Estimations suggest that over 50% of women have been sexually assaulted by Myanmar soldiers. Victims of this include girls as young as 15 years old. And this is only the accounts of those that have survived to tell the tale and report them, not all of those who were killed or died right after these horrible acts happened. One of the most telling quotes is from a soldier of the National Army who said verbatim, and I quote, "We have the authority to rape women," end quote. All these statistics, quotes, and more show this to be perhaps the largest case of sexual violence in the world. Since then, they have tried to destroy evidence of what they did. The military has wiped clean as much as they could to try and get away with all of this. Journalists were banned from the conflict zone, and international investigation is heavily prevented. 400,000 people were forced out of their homes as 200-plus villages were completely destroyed. Current estimations state that at least 25,000 Rohingya were killed in the mass killings of 2017. Refugees continue to pour out of Rakhine. 800,000 people started to live in Bangladesh refugee camps. These camps are a bed for starvation, environmental struggle, and complete lack of education for young children. In this area, there are no teachers, so these children, thousands of them, will likely be a generation that is completely skipped in being educated. There will not be a proper education for a whole generation of Rohingya people. Imagine the effect that will have on the future of their people. And after that, we get to where we are now, which is with the genocide case. On November 11th, 2019, the Gambia opened a case against Myanmar for committing a genocide. In 2020, the International Court of Justice of the UN ordered Myanmar to enact measures to prevent genocidal actions against the Rohingya in Rakhine and to report compliance with this order. Then, politically, in 2021, a coup ousted the democratic government of Myanmar, which attempted to hold an election not long before this. This stopped the 2022 democratic election winners from taking power. And at the end of 2022, a ceasefire was signed which had positive effects for about a year. Then, in November of 2023, it faltered as a lack of progress in bringing back the Rohingya into Rakhine, mixed with the fighting between the ARSA and military junta. And then, violence followed. Since the start of the renewed conflict, there has been a continued isolation of those living in Rakhine and illegal, unsanctioned killings of Rohingya citizens. Then all of that brings us to the present, where today there are over 1 million Rohingya living in Bangladesh's Cox Camp as refugees, which is horrible on its own, but there has been secondary causes, which are environmental issues. 8,000 acres of forest were cleared for refugees to settle here, and this has changed the ecosystem of this whole region in Bangladesh. And then to bring it back to politics, it took years, but the case against Myanmar for committing a genocide opened by the Gambia is finally making its rounds. In January of this year, 2026, the top court of the UN heard its first full case of genocide in 10 years. As I write this case is going on with Myanmar, who is in full denial of what happened and is currently happening. The worst of what happened is hopefully behind us, but until justice is served, we cannot be silent. It is as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said, quote, "This is a textbook example of ethnic cleansing," end quote. And now that I've taken you through the history of what led to this horrid event and all that has transpired before, during, and after, we must now look to the present and the future. As I said, we are at a point where the International Court of Justice is heavy on Myanmar. The Gambia has taken them to court and tried them for genocide, very similar to the way South Africa has taken Israel to court for genocide in Gaza. What will happen here will affect not only the people of Myanmar, not only the Rohingya, and not only the people of the Rakhine state, but will affect the world. If there is a guilty verdict here, it will put a lot of pressure on what happens in the South Africa and Israel case, where South Africa again alleges Israel has committed genocide. But even without looking internationally, looking purely at what is happening here, this is a necessary moment in history. People living here have struggled, suffered. The Rohingya have been pushed around despite their long history living in Arakan, that is now Rakhine. There is no reason for people to be treated that way, no reason for people to be tossed aside, no reason for people of different religions and faiths to be seen as anything but people. This military has treated them as less than such, and the government has done all they can to isolate them. What happens next is in the hands of people that are not you and I. But putting continued pressure on them, being loud and being aware of these things happening, means that we can see when they start and try to stop them before they occur. Anything we can do to put pressure on the people overseeing this case and put pressure on the world to make it a better place, we must do. I may live 8,000 miles away from this nation, may never meet a person of Rohingya descent in my entire life. But what matters is that we are people. We are all human beings living on the same planet who have the same rights. That's why they're called human rights. And no human should be forced from their home by bomb. No human should be taken away from their family. No human should see loved ones' lives taken right in front of them. And no human should have to deal with sexual misconduct on the level that these people have dealt with. If you care about human beings in any way, through your faith, through your neighbors, through whatever you believe in the world, you must pay attention to what happens in the case with the Rohingya, Myanmar, and the government. And you must continue to look around the world to see cases like this, because all that matters is that we are all one people, and that is human people. I care about you. I care about everyone who's able to watch this. With that being said, that will be the end for me. I will put some links in the description to try and keep different news sources up and any way we can kind of help, be it donations, anything. Of course, all kindness of your heart, nothing required. But I do require humans to care about other humans, and I hope that this video helps you care about the people living here. But with that being said, that will be the end for me. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you continue to follow me around the world as I take on different events, history, and more, because everything that's happening in the world does have a place in the spotlight. Thank you.